Now, if my LA Noire skills do not fail me, I'm pretty sure that they did it. So yeah, after our little encounter with the Ginyu Force, we're left all on our own to go and find our Crimson Loftwing. There are several people who will actually point you in the right direction. First of all, you want to talk to this guy on the park bench. He'll basically tell you that you need to go see Pippet, as he's the bird expert, and I guess that automatically means that he'd know where your Crimson Loftwing is, despite the fact that several people have probably hid him away from you in a cold, dark area. Also, this girl will mention that if you're having trouble finding anyone, you should probably look at your map. No, the red dots on your map aren't marked for where people are, they're actually save points. But it's not a bad idea. I'd say this game is probably the most heavy when it comes to using map, and it's certainly one of the most helpful, as areas can be a little bit confusing your first playthrough. So, yeah, just press plus to open your map, as if that was too difficult to figure out. Alongside this, we can talk to this little girl who says that she's going to be hanging out with her special friend, whom I'm assuming is named Dr. Humbert. Alongside that, you can go to this bridge right here. Now, this is not actually a required thing, but basically, I'm sure a lot of you guys who've played this game already might think of searching the other side of the town. And it turns out you can't, because this gaggle of housewives over here is blocking your way, complaining about all the work that they have to do, while it's not doing any work at all. Keep it up, ladies! Doing a good job, just like every episode of Sex in the City, complaining about stuff that they're not actually doing. And finally, you can talk to this girl who I swear looks like Jill Valentine if she had a kid with Pippi Longstocking. This is Karain, and she basically tells you that Pippet is out in front of the Sparring Hall, which, of course, being that we want to go see Pippet, is probably the most helpful hint. I'm pretty sure if you simply talk to Karain, she'll give you all the information that you need, but I'm a walkthrough guy, so of course I have to show everything. It's not like you just skipped all the information and just told you where to go yourself. What do you think? Are you stupid? No, of course not. So anyway, go in front of the Sparring Hall and speak to Pippet, and basically, he'll give you a rundown of the situation. As it turns out, Kenneth Parcell over here was actually apparently bullied by Groose and his buddies, and he actually knows the story. Now, I'm not entirely sure why he didn't fight back. After all, those red cheeks clearly tell me that he knows Volt Tackle, but nonetheless, he didn't stand up for himself, and as it turns out, they blackmailed him and told him that he'd better keep his mouth shut. Basically, they do it by telling him that he won't be able to ride a bird again. Which I actually find kind of humorous, because it's like, you know, even if you just place his dead body on a bird, he'd still be able to ride a bird. I guess they're just saying he'll break his legs or his arms or something, I don't know. In fact, I really don't think that the Ginyu Force over there is particularly tough, so I really do think that's an empty threat, but nonetheless, you can understand why he'd be a bit disturbed by it. So, Pippet mentions it sounds like Groose and his buddies plan to hide your bird in the waterfall. And the waterfall is, well, honestly, there's only one waterfall in town, so I really doubt that it's going to be pretty difficult to find him. Now, as an interesting note, you can actually go to the waterfall instead of going here and getting all this information, and you'll basically figure out this plan on your own. I just decided to skip it because ultimately, you will see the same cutscene even when you go to the waterfall, and you're gonna have to go to the Sparring Hall anyway, because you need to get an item to get into the Waterfall Cave. Basically, it's blocked off by some bamboo shots. So yeah, to get into here, we're gonna first have to go in here. So, if you want, you can go to the Waterfall Cave first, but there really is no reason. Then again, you also don't have to talk to any of the characters that I did, so me saying that there's no reason for any of that is kind of a pointless excuse. Now, if we enter the Sparring Hall here, we can find the Knight Captain, and he'll basically explain swordplay to us. Just as a little off note, a friend of mine, Silver Phoenix K, was actually talking about his first playthrough of this game, and he and his friends were playing through the game, and they were giving everyone voices, and they were alternating voice actors and stuff. So, the guy who did the voice actor for the Knight Captain actually decided to give him an effeminate thespian voice, which now I can only hear his voice in that voice to me. Though occasionally I kind of hear him in a solid Snake voice, and I'm really not sure why. Just a fun little anecdote, I guess. So anyway, inside of this chest is the practice sword, which you'll basically have for the rest of this tutorial area. I find it kind of funny that they decided to put the practice sword in a chest, considering that there are clearly swords lining the walls, and it's not like that sword is particularly special. I mean, quite literally, it's a practice sword, and the edge is sharp-ish. I mean, it still has a sharp edge, clearly implying that it really wasn't that sharp. Also, I decided to examine the small wallet because I don't believe that I've mentioned anything about that. You can only hold up to 300 rupees, which seems pretty cavernous for this point in the game, but believe me, this game uses rupees up very quickly. So, I'm sure all of you guys have experienced this, but the sword play is completely one-to-one. Essentially, you're going to move the Wii Remote in the way that they imply by the logs. It's not a particularly hard mechanic, and I don't really think I have to explain too much of it. A lot of enemies will block certain ways, and you'll basically have to counter that specific way. So it's nice to get an idea of the most basic form of attack that you'll need. Most of the time, people seem to have a difficulty with doing things like thrusting, but ultimately, I have never experienced that issue. I can see where you might experience the issue, but thrusting, it does seem to detect it very well. If I had to give some advice for anyone who's having control issues, it's either sit as far away from the motion bar as possible, or sit, as close to the TV as possible. Because I think, I'm not entirely sure, I think it does have something to do with how the pointer is calibrated. Alongside that, I'd also recommend, that you get acquainted to going to the menu, because occasionally you might have to recalibrate your Wii Remote if it starts to act up. Ultimately, some other advice is, a lot of people might think to move really big and, you know, swing their arms as hard as they can, but really smaller movements are the better ones to do when you're doing sword combat. In my experience, it'll detect a short, quick jab as opposed to a full-on stab, like extending your whole arm. So yeah, just kind of a quick flick of the Wii Remote, and Link will automatically stab, in my experience anyway. Your control scheme might be different. I've heard a lot of different complaints, like the fact that Link won't stab at all, or just that, you know, Link's sword tends to go wherever the fuck it wants at some point. But usually I would just recommend that you, recalibrate it. Also, the Knight Captain mentions that log over there is only used for defense, but I actually like to play a little game where I see how long I can volley it before it hits me in the stomach, and usually I can only do it 3 or 4 times before it comes back around and tries to beat me. Now, the Knight Captain, when you try and leave, will basically tell you that it is dangerous to go out into a town full of peaceful young people and swing around a weapon like you're, you know, Buffalo Bill or some other movie reference. So basically, you're going to have to talk to Pippet before you can just walk in here. I'm sure a lot of more experienced players like myself would have tried that, but ultimately, I think you actually have to know where your bird is to understand that it's an emergency or something. I've actually not tried not talking to Pippet or not going to the Waterfall Cave to see if you actually need the sword, but nonetheless, I'm sure that it can be done. I just don't know myself. But yeah, so after that conversation, we'll get permission to use the sword throughout the town, and finally, we can begin our search for the Loft Wing. You can talk to everyone else, but there really isn't a whole lot that they say that's particularly important. Fledge will basically berate himself for being too much of a wimp to stand up to Groose and his buddies, and Pippet will basically pat himself on the back for being such a great upperclassman. He'll also give you some advice that you should save before you go into dangerous areas, which, assuming that this is your first video game ever, is actually excellent advice. I think a lot of you guys probably already know about that, but most Zelda games, especially the recent ones, are very famous for being a bit more lenient than they usually are. In fact, some people would call games like Twilight Princess or Wind Waker some of the easiest games that they've ever played. This game actually does have a lot more challenging areas. I have found myself either low on health or close to dying on my first playthrough, so I would say that's pretty good advice. So anyway, if you try and exit the area, something very strange will happen. Basically, this little buoyant stone type thingy will pop out of the ground, and it'll basically be all like, "Hey friend, come over here and talk to me. Trust me, I just popped out of the ground." Now, I don't know about you guys, but whenever I see a giant evil stone pop out of the ground, and it's painted gray and also has the Matrix running through the side of it, I automatically decide that it's a good person and it is indeed my best friend. Seriously, look at his tear tattoo. Clearly, he's a cold-hardened killer. No, basically this is the Sheikah Stone, and he acts as the super guide for the game. A lot of people have actually gotten on the cake of getting really angry at Nintendo for including super guides, basically ways for the game to explain where to go, or even play itself in the case of the new Super Mario Bros. Or Donkey Kong games. But I actually do understand why they would implement such a system in this game. Recently, Zelda Dungeon actually posted a Facebook post that basically said that Nintendo admits that a lot of people don't get through their first Zelda game, or through a Zelda game on their first playthrough, usually waiting for time to come back and pick it up. So about like 20 or 30%, I think it was, of Zelda players ever end up making it to the last screen of the game their first time playing through, and I guess that's a bit discouraging when you think about it, so I can totally understand why they would do that. But still, a lot of hardcore Zelda fans are a little bit upset about it, and I am too, in a way. But really, he's in such an inconvenient place in Skyloft. He's in an area that you basically never have to go back to, and ultimately, you don't even have to talk to him if you don't want to, so I guess there's really no reason to be too mad about it. Now, there are 2 ways to get into the Waterfall Cave area. The first is to go around, but there's a good chance that you might find that you're gonna fall off, and it's also a bit confusing, as basically you have to go directly from the school, turn back, and then go counterclockwise from the market area. Or you can just take the market area's plaza and then jump down the bridge and go down like I just did. I'm gonna show the other way eventually at some point, even if entirely by accident, but it's something to keep in mind. Also something to keep in mind, this bird statue that only has one eye. It's not particularly important, and when I say keep it in your mind, I mean just remember that it exists at all, because you really won't be dealing with that until a very, very long time into the game. And when I say very long time, I mean like endgame stuff, so don't even worry about it. Now, once you come over here, and if you came over here before, this is the cutscene you would have experienced while you came over here. And ironically enough, there's also a cave that says, Waterfall Cave, beware of blood-sucking monsters. No kids allowed. Really now? I was just gonna let all of my children go into the cave full of blood-sucking monsters. And even more funny to me is how specific it is. But that's not important. Slice down these logs and join me in the next episode when we enter the Waterfall Cave. Alright, Chaos out.